Hey everybody, welcome to another recording session of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today are two of my regular cohorts in crime. On my right, John Richardson of the Only Guns and Money blog. And right down below me, Rob Morse of Self-Defense Gun Stories. We convinced Rob to stay above water for one night. So he decided to go ahead and join us. Yeah. Oh, dude, we need it up here, and there's not any in the forecast for a week. In the entire 7-day forecast, the most we've got is a 19% chance of rain.
Whereas we're going to get the outer bands from Idalia.
All right, let me look over here. I want to welcome everybody as we get started. We're not recording for the podcast yet, but we will be shortly. I want to remind everybody, if you're watching us on the Facebook or YouTube channels for Polite Society, we do get those comments the quickest. Go ahead and comment on the live video. No matter where you're at, if you want to comment on the live video you got going. One way or another, I will get them. It just takes some longer. If you want to comment in and you don't see it popping up on the screen, just jump over to the Polite Society podcast on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll get those comments and get them on the air. I already got comments coming in. Let me get this one in real quick before we start from George. Greetings, Patriot. I survived Hurricane Hillary. Thank goodness, George, you didn't have to survive President Hillary. So, and you know, there was a bunch of hype about that about a week ago that Hillary was going to go up and blast San Diego, and I heard a whole lot of nothing.
She was going to do a speaking engagement there,
No, the actual Hurricane Hillary.
Oh. The California coast is surrounded by cold water. It would have to come up through the Gulf of California there.
It did.
Okay.
So, but I never, Jim Cantori didn't show up to the best of my knowledge down in San Diego. So I think they just got a bunch of rain. So
I heard they had some flash floods and a few mudslides, but I think Baja got it much worse. And
yes,
being an Easterner, hearing, they had 2 to 4 inches of rain, I'm like, and your problem is?
If you're more than what, Rob, about a mile and a half from the ocean, it's flat desert down in Southern California.
Well, yeah, on the backside of the hills. John, to give them some credit, their annual rainfall is about 6 or 7 inches. Mm-hmm. And if you get a third of that in a weekend, it's a problem.
Yeah, the ground doesn't absorb, unlike out here.
Right, where we suck up 5 inches an afternoon and go, okay, when do we play golf, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Let me scroll up and look at... Yeah. Well, everything looks good on my end, guys. Somebody was nice and wrote the intro, and let me just increase the font here so my older eyes can read it. And I believe we're ready, guys.
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Masada Yub in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masada Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. We're recording this one on Monday, August the 28th, 2023. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show, we talk about the fortunate end of the Tennessee governor's push for more gun control in a special session of the legislature.
I'm John Richardson, and we will celebrate the 49th anniversary of the Second Amendment Foundation. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode, it's 674 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. As soon as I find that button.
The button.
We are back. It's Monday night. It's just after 7 o'clock in the Central Time Zone, the only time zone that matters. That means it's time for another episode of the Polite Society podcast. Rob, you were out a week ago. You were doing something incredibly interesting. What's been up with you, man?
Well, not to the Second Amendment Foundation. I got to live aboard a boat and scuba dive off of it. I was out of the country for a week, and they don't have the right of armed defense in that country. As soon as I got back today, my clothes weren't all washed, and I was out carrying. John, how about you?
Well, I spent the last week on grandparent duty. We helped my daughter get her. We helped my daughter get her classroom ready for a bunch of fourth graders, and took care of the grandkids the rest of the time, because school for them didn't start actually until today. For Aria, it starts tomorrow. They're splitting up the kindergartners. And given North Carolina's gun and knife laws, I did not carry on campus or even have a knife on me, as both would be illegal.
All right. Well, please tell me that, and I don't think we're going to get kicked off of YouTube for this, but please tell me you were carrying a flashlight.
There was no need. It was during the day.
Okay. All right. Well, depending on the flashlight, it can still be effective as a blinding tool. I don't care what time of day it is. If you get hit with 1,000 lumens in the eyes, you're going to be seeing stars for a while.
Well, I was thinking of the old 6D cell mag light myself, but
also a good impact weapon. You get brained with one of those, you're out of commission for a little while,
or forever.
Yeah. For me, it's just been more preparation, and now I can tell you right now, from now until we get back, it's going to be all AMCON, all GRPC for me. Been hip deep in planning. Today was getting the studio we had to inventory everything. Everything is now packed in boxes, with the exception of the 2 computers that I use to do this broadcast and the Bullet. Everything is packed up and ready to go. I will have one evening of packing up these 2 computers, assorted monitors and such, but everything else is packed into 1, 2, 3, 4 crates and ready to go into the car to leave. I've got a 5th crate that will get packed with the computers that and monitors that I'm using right now. That's all getting ready to go down. We've still got a lot more to do. Quite literally, and I've said this before, it is hundreds and hundreds of man-hours to do AMCON and GRPC. And most of those hundreds fall on these shoulders. So that's what's been up with me this past week. That and doing Bullet broadcasts. I want to try one thing here real quick. I think, if I can remember where it is, there it is. I think this is going to work. The website for SDRN, Polite Society Podcast, and AMCON has been down for a while because of some issues with GoDaddy. We've left GoDaddy. We are no longer with them. And by the way, my email was down, but email is kind of back up, and so should be the Self-Defense Radio Network website. And you can see right there, it did work. We are live. Right now you can see, let me go ahead and grab that, pull it down. There are 12 listed right there, or 11 listed right there, shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. As soon as we get everything finished up, getting moved over, we're going to be adding a couple more shows that are on the network, and we're trying, and the move is up right now to try and onboard some more shows. So do head to sdrn.us. If you're into gun rights, that is the website for you. You can subscribe. The subscription information for each show is right there, as well as you can listen live right off the website. So let's go ahead and get away for our first break. When we come back, we've got our news segment. SAF has a significant anniversary that happened this past Friday. Plus, we've got a lot of news from Tennessee and other places. We'll get to that when we come back, right after we hear from ACLDN.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by Network President Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
All right, this is a news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Before we get into news, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about Hurricane Hillary hitting the West Coast in Southern California. And George is down in that area. We put up a couple of his comments before we actually started recording the podcast, but I've got to get this comment up. He came back with some of the effects of Hurricane Hillary. We got 4 inches of rain and a tiny bit of water wind. My brother-in-law's potted plant blew over, and he's got a GoFundMe set up. Well, our thoughts and prayers go out to your brother-in-law's potted plant, George. I'm telling you, man.
You'll rebuild. I know. You'll come back better. Uh-huh.
San Diego strong. Exactly. San Diego strong. All right. Let's go ahead and this is going to sound a little bit different. I've been trying this for the past week. This is going to sound a little bit different for those of you who are listening on podcasts, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to have somebody else reading the news. Here we go.
Today marks the 49th anniversary of the founding of the Second Amendment Foundation, an organization which has become a powerhouse in firearms rights litigation, with significant victories all over the map, including a landmark Supreme Court ruling in 2010, McDonald v. City of Chicago. As the saying goes, noted SAF founder and Executive Vice President Alan M. Gottlieb, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go in our mission to win firearms freedom one lawsuit at a time. Right now, the SAF staff, a small but dedicated group based in a 2-building complex, is planning for the 38th Annual Gun Rights Policy Conference, GRPC. This year's event will be held September 22nd to 24th in Phoenix, Arizona for the 2-day event, which attracts hundreds of gun rights activists and leading Second Amendment advocates from around the country. Attendance at the GRPC is free, and to pre-register, sign up at saf.org/GRPC. SAF's litigation efforts began with 2 early court victories, challenging a ban on handgun sales in New Haven, Connecticut, and an outright ban on handgun ownership in San Francisco, California. Those were 2 key lawsuits we won, and that was just the beginning of something which has grown into an organization we can proudly say represents and protects American gun owners and their right to keep and bear arms, Gottlieb observed. Since then, SAF has filed more than 250 lawsuits and currently has 50 legal actions filed in court defending Second Amendment rights. In addition, the Second Amendment Foundation's Legal Preemption Project has removed over 600 local anti-gun rights laws off the books simply by threatening to go to court. Adam Kraut, a practicing civil rights attorney based in the Philadelphia area, and who came on board late last year as SAF's executive director, is excited and planning for the future, which includes a bigger 50th anniversary celebration in 2024. We're living in challenging and exciting times, Kraut said, and I am glad to be a part of this organization. What SAF has accomplished with a veritable skeleton crew over the past 4 decades only signals what we have on the horizon as we continue to expand our legal footprint. We're just getting started.
All 3 of us have been to many GRPCs. John, you're going to miss it this year, but you've got a great note up in show notes. I'm going to let you lead this one off, man.
Well, speaking of GRPC, I remember sitting with Alan Gottlieb and a few others, including you and maybe Rob, I can't remember. And it was after the last GRPC held in Tampa, which was a few years ago. And Alan was explaining to us how and why he started the Second Amendment Foundation. It was like a living history lesson. It's like listening to one of the founding fathers telling us why they put some provision in the Constitution.
Oh, very much so.
If you can make it to GRPC, you owe it to yourself to go. It'll cost you money to get there. It'll cost you a moderate amount at a hotel. It's a conference center hotel. It's not cheap. There may be, a deep 6 motel that you can stay in nearby if you're that desperate. You're going to meet the people who are changing history and have changed it from coast to coast. I found my first GRPC fascinating. I continue to go. Thank you, SAF, for putting it on.
I've said this before, and I'm going to go to more recent memory from GRPC. I'm going to go to last year when we were in Dallas. And one thing that's not in this story that at the very end of GRPC, Alan was talking about was SAF. If for those of you who are my age and are big radio geeks, who radio, not so much television, has been a part of their life since they were toddlers. SAF is a big part of the reason that overnight talk radio is a big sensation, and Alan Gottlieb helped launch the career of one Art Bell, who is a legend in overnight talk radio. That all came out of a SAF resolution to actually get into terrestrial radio to expand the reach of Second Amendment advertising, because they were finding that regular radio, even back in the 70s and 80s, wasn't taking gun rights advertisements. And so they started a radio network. It eventually became the radio network did get sold, and it eventually became what was now Westwood One. And Art Bell was the very small voice that was on Westwood One, and what became Westwood One. And Art helped push that show, or Alan helped push Art's show forward. And again, Art Bell became an overnight massive voice. One more thing that if you aren't deeply involved in Second Amendment rights and don't go to Gun Rights Policy Conference, you may not have ever heard.
John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, my first GRPC was in 2010 in Burlingame, California, South San Francisco. And Rob mentioned the conference rate at the hotel, and it's a conference hotel. I think we paid $109 a night. We extended that trip and we stayed at a number of Holiday Inn Expresses for $119 a night. So the conference rate, I mean, we were staying in a Hyatt Regency, and then we found Holiday Inn Expresses to be more expensive. So you're getting a supreme quality hotel at a really good rate. And if you can find a roommate, more the better.
Absolutely. This year in Phoenix, let me go ahead and pull up the website. It takes me just a second here. If I can type correctly. The Marriott Phoenix Airport is the hotel that is hosting GRPC this year. And there is a discount if you go to saf.org/GRPC. That is the home for registration for Gun Rights Policy Conference. And scroll down just a tiny bit, and there's a sentence that says you can book your hotel room with our exclusive low group rate by following this link. And let me see if I can find out how much that is per night, because just open secret, SAF pays for my room, so I don't have to worry about it.
Well, they should.
It's $159 a night this year, and that's not bad. It's if you can get there, as both Rob and John have said, if you can get there, get there. It is well worth it. You do have to pay for the hotel room. You do have to pay to get there. But once you're there, SAF feeds you Friday night. They feed you lunch Saturday. They feed you Saturday night. You've got to take care of breakfast and your meals on Sunday, and that's it. So, and they give you a lot of books. They give you all kinds of book information. So, let's go ahead and let's get to our second story. And I got to come over to this screen and do this.
Tennessee Republican lawmakers hit an impasse Thursday, just a few days into a special session sparked by a deadly school shooting in March, leaving little certainty about what they might ultimately pass, yet all but guaranteeing it won't be any significant gun control change. After advancing a few bills this week, the Senate quickly adjourned Thursday without taking up any more proposals, promising to come back Monday. The announcement prompted booing and jeers from the crowd of gun control advocates watching in the galleries. Meanwhile, the House is continuing to churn through a full slate of other proposals, and the Senate has not promised to take any of those up. Senate Speaker Randy McNally told reporters Thursday that senators will consider any bills the House may amend, but held off from promising to making a compromise with the other chamber. "We might be here for too long of a period of time. We're waiting to see what happens in the House," McNally said.
Yeah, red flag law is not going to happen in Tennessee. That is very clear. I got that off of Tom Knighton's story off of Bearing Arms. It is absolutely clear there's no support for a red flag law. That is the big one that was the concern. Could there still be some not so great stuff that comes? Sure there could. But major stuff coming out of this, no, I don't think so. Rob, you got an interesting comment up in show notes. What do you think, man?
Yeah, the bills came up after a person who was confused about her sexuality committed a mass murder. She wrote a manifesto, yet we're never allowed to see that manifesto. I'm surprised that wasn't brought up and that the manifesto wasn't made public or leaked during this legislative session. I was surprised. John, what do you think?
Well, going to that comment, first, I was just watching the news this evening, and they were talking about the shooter down, the racially motivated shooting down in Jacksonville, Florida this past weekend. And they said, we expect the shooter's manifesto or writings or whatever to be released very soon. And I'm thinking, okay, if Florida can release something from a guy who's an out-and-out racist, what is it about the murderer at Covenant School that we cannot read her manifesto?
Oh,
what's I think
she's a protected political class.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not pejorative. I just have a firm grasp of the obvious.
You do indeed. The one thing I was going to say about this is I was really pleased to see so many of the DC Project there in Tennessee testifying and giving interviews why they were against these new red flag laws.
Yeah. There are two areas this week that the DC Project has been active. They started out the week down in Tennessee and spent time down there, and then Amanda Sufcool and a bunch of the girls went from there up to Boston and were at a Boston rally on Sunday. So, they are those DC Project girls, man. They're in high gear, and obviously you see Amanda's not here with us tonight. I think at this moment she's traveling. So, it's that they are doing a great job and putting the miles on cars. That I'm, as a former trucker, I'm impressed how quickly she's getting around the country. So let's go ahead and go on to our third story, and this one, Missouri story. Hang on.
Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey put St. Louis City Mayor Tishora Jones on notice this week after she announced plans to introduce legislation that would prohibit military-grade weapons on city streets and make it a crime for insurrectionists and those convicted of hate crimes to possess firearms. A press release shared that Bailey sent Jones a letter stating that her office's proposed legislation would violate Missourians' constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Bailey wrote, "Our state constitution guarantees that the right of law-abiding citizens to bear arms shall be unalienable and that any restriction on these rights shall be subject to strict scrutiny, and the state of Missouri shall be obligated to uphold these rights and shall under no circumstances decline to protect against their infringement." The people's elected representatives have already spoken on this issue by preempting local authority in state statute. To implement your plan would be to violate Missouri law. This follows a post by the city that stated, "In the coming days, in partnership with the mayor's office, aldermen are ready to introduce common sense gun safety legislation," said Mayor Tishora O. Jones. "We come together around a shared vision, a safer, stronger St. Louis, ready to stand up for our values. We know Missourians are demanding state-level action to pass measures like red flag laws and background checks, but we are ready to try every tool available to us at the local level to protect families from gun violence." According to the city press release, the new proposed legislation would prohibit military-grade weapons on our streets, prevent transfer or sale of guns to minors.
All right, pause just a second. It's already illegal to own any fully automatic weapon made after 1984. It's already illegal to transfer a firearm to a minor. Let me get the very short amount of the story left. Here we go.
Take action on ghost guns and similar untraceable firearms. Prepare St. Louis for the passage of Blair's Law. Prohibit insurrectionists and those convicted of hate crimes from having guns. In his notice to the mayor, Bailey stood firm in protecting state citizens' gun rights, stating, "By this letter, let me be clear. I will zealously perform my constitutional duty to defend the rights of each law-abiding citizen to keep and bear arms in defense of their home, person, family, and property, which is the promise made to them by the Missouri Constitution."
All right, I covered a little bit of this on Saturday, but I want to go back into it again. I hate chocolate pudding. I hate it. At what point do I get convicted of a hate crime because I've admitted hating something? I'm being extraordinarily facetious here, but you get my point. At some point, there has to be a distinction made where words cannot matter. If somebody's convicted of a violent crime, then I can understand restricting rights. But short of that, there's nothing that should prohibit me from owning whatever the heck I want to own. And oh, by the way, if I believe that the person who sits in the Oval Office today is not the person who won the election the last time it came through, does that make me an insurrectionist?
Well, that ought to generate some comments, Paul.
Yeah, one would hope. John, you got a good comment. What you got, man?
Well, before I say that, I'm just going to say that I think Tashara has been hanging out with the wrong people. Obviously, it sounds like she's been hanging out with Josh Horowitz, who used to be with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, whose main epithet they always threw at gun rights activists were insurrectionist, mainly because we objected to what Obama was doing. Go figure. Anyway, Missouri state law is really strong on preemption. It reserves any regulation of firearms, ammo, components, or accessories to the state. And then it goes on in another paragraph to say that this would include the purchase or possession of any firearm, accessory, across the board. Only the state has that ability. The only thing that municipalities or counties can regulate is discharge within their borders and open carry within their borders. And that is it. And I think we need to make the point about St. Louis. The city of St. Louis, which is what Tashara Jones represents, is about only 30% of the population of St. Louis County. The county as a whole has about 1 million residents. The city of St. Louis has less than 300,000. So the majority of the people in North County, South County, West County, as they call it there, are not on board with this. Rob?
Even Ferguson, it's Ferguson, Missouri, which became popular because that's where the Black Lives Matter movement got its start. It's right next door, but that's not St. Louis, and these restrictions would not be valid there.
Yeah, and the only reason you don't have East County is that would be the river.
That would be East St. Louis, Illinois. Yeah.
No. East, that would be the river.
Yeah. Rob, what do you think?
These proposals are set up to get Bloomberg money. The prosecution is the punishment. And if you are a politically disfavored group, then you will be prosecuted for, that revolver that you had was once a military-grade firearm, therefore you will be prosecuted. It's strangely reminiscent of Jim Crow laws to me. John, what do you think about it?
Well, no, I was just in St. Louis approximately 2.5 weeks ago. We spent a week there. And
one weekend.
No, full week.
No, it's a joke.
Okay.
Sorry.
And one of the places we ate the last night we were there is a place called Sharpshooter's Grill and Range. It's a barbecue restaurant with an attached gun range. And what pleased me immensely is that when I saw, while we were sitting down to eat, I saw a black couple coming out with their Glock pistol cases. As we were leaving, in came another 3 black people, one of whom was in a wheelchair, coming in to shoot. So it's not a white or black thing in terms of gun rights in St. Louis. It's those who believe in rights and those who do not believe in rights.
They need a threat, John. The politicians need to get in the news and say that they are saving us from something. Well, their guns work. I mean, the media's on their side with that. But I agree, it is heartening to see more and more people pick up their right to defend themselves. Hopefully they'll carry that impression into the voting booth.
One other thing I want to, and this was just touched on a little bit by both of you, all firearms that are in common use were previously military-grade weapons. All the way back to the flintlock rifles and matchlock rifles. Those were previously military-grade weapons. That you at some point, again, we got to go back to, if a mind can think it, it's not illegal. All right. Let's see here. Let's see here. I don't know if this is going to work correctly or not. I think this one is about New York.
Assemblyman Steve Hawley, Republican representing Batavia, denounced the state government's recent decision to require background checks for all ammunition purchases in New York. While the current system allows for free customer background checks for firearm purchases, this initiative would hand over this duty to the New York State Police. Once this new system goes into effect, customers will be charged an additional fee of $9 for firearms and $2.50 for ammunition in order to cover the cost of a background check. Hawley is disappointed the state government is once again disregarding New Yorkers' Second Amendment rights. This new plan to require background checks for ammunition purchases is completely outrageous, said Hawley. Not only does this infringe on our Second Amendment rights, but they're making responsible, law-abiding gun owners foot the bill. Actual criminals are not going to go through the process of doing a background check and pay an additional fee on top of that. This will only deter law-abiding citizens from exercising their constitutional rights, continued Hawley. As New Yorkers, we shouldn't have to worry about career politicians in Albany picking away at our rights piece by piece. As your assemblyman, I'll do everything within my power to make sure our Second Amendment rights are safe and secure.
All right, Rob, you're first up in show notes to comment on this one, man. What you got?
Well, I just went through a strange foreign security experience where there were literally 4 different people that wanted to pat me down, standing right behind the other. And I was going, okay, you guys just had too many staff and you had to look busy, except it's more pernicious than that. I mean, think of what this is saying in New York. You can own a gun legally, but we need to test you again because the mere ownership of that gun doesn't prove that you're not a felon, even though we just... Anyway, you can have your concealed carry permit, but we need to test you again and again and again. They're attacking our culture. John, talk to me.
Well, I mean, if you're charging $9 for firearms and $2.50 for every ammunition purchase, even though they could do a free one through the FBI's NICS check, this is the equivalent of a poll tax or a tax to exercise your constitutional rights. The Supreme Court said that poll taxes were illegal. We now have an amendment to the Constitution that says they're illegal. Why are not these fees also illegal?
I believe they should be, and it's not just a tax. It's also, I'm going to put this out there. I don't have any way to prove this, but it's also an opportunity to delay, because it can take up to 30 days for that background check to come back. I buy ammo. It normally doesn't last 30 days, or depending on the kind of ammo I buy and the amount I buy. Generally, I'm buying ammo more than once a month. So It's a way to put a delay in the system, because the New York State Police will not be held accountable if all of a sudden, every time, and I buy ammo a lot more than I buy guns, every time somebody goes to buy ammo, that's going to load the system up. Oh my goodness, we're so overwhelmed, and it's taking 6 months to get a background check back. Not our fault.
Exactly.
Have you noticed on many websites lately that do sell ammunition that they will say we cannot or will not ship ammo to California, New York, and a few other states? I mean, I've just noticed that. That plus, they're now asking, are you at least 18 or are you 21? Because of other state laws that they're trying to stay in compliance with, saying, oh, we can't let a 17-year-old see something about guns because that might make them part of the gun culture. And we don't want that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And most of those websites have when they ask, are you 18, are you 21, they're not asking. Their security measures, you just click a button. As long as you can read English, you can get around that. Just click the button and you're gone. So the website I go to the most when I'm looking for ammunition, AmmoSeek, doesn't have anything up there about that. But when you click on the links to buy from the actual websites where AmmoSeek gets their information from, then you do get the pop-ups that say, are you 18, or we do not excuse me, we do not ship here, we do not ship there.
Mm-hmm. Criminals don't get their guns from gun shops or gun shows. Those are both FFLs, and criminals don't apply for background checks. Just doesn't happen. Like, we're talking about 1 out of 100 criminals who are arrested for using a firearm illegally. They get them the same place they get illegal aliens and drugs. They import them from other criminals.
Let me get some comments in here. And some of these go back to the last story, but I'm really falling behind on comments because they're coming in pretty well. We'll start by going back to Warsaw Patriot's comment from last story. And he said, I'm worried Biden's going to push for more gun control after 2 shootings again. Well, Warsaw Patriot, I'm going to say, is the sun going to rise in the east tomorrow? Because if it does, Biden's going to push for more gun control. Yeah, it's just right. That's what he does. And then I like this one. Jesus Wins, Bert of Michigan says, Candace Owens for VP. I would second that because, quite honestly, it'll keep my governor, Kristi Noem, here in South Dakota. Let's see here. Dana says, can they save us from themselves? I like that one. Yeah, let's see here. Brooke. By the way, I did catch your Saturday broadcast, Brooke. Eventually, I came in just as you were getting ready to go out, but I did catch some of your Saturday broadcast. Brooke says it's a determinant and added pain in the butt and dollars for the state to impose more anti-gun laws. Let's see here. I want to get in one more here. This is for this one. What's more important, deaths by illegal drugs, aka fentanyl or crack, or murders misusing firearms? I think they're very, very heavily intertwined.
Warsaw Patriot, honest citizens defend themselves millions of times a year. You're right, drugs are a huge problem, but fortunately drug deaths are in the tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands. So we need another couple decimal places on there before the two problems match each other in scope, and you can't solve a small problem by making it a larger one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Any further thoughts, John, before we take off to this last story?
No, let's move on.
Okay, one more story, then we're going to go out and get done with our news segment. Here's our final story for the day.
A new bill from Republican Representative Chip Roy of Texas would keep Biden administration bureaucrats at the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, from meddling with veterans' Second Amendment right to buy and own guns. The legislation, introduced on Friday by Representatives Roy, Eli Crane of Arizona, Lance Gooden of Texas, Andrew Clyde of Georgia, Andy Harris of Maryland, and Mary Miller of Illinois, specifically bars the VA from sending veterans' names to the Department of Justice to be added to the federal government's no-gun list. Currently, the VA forces any veterans who want to appoint a fiduciary to manage their benefits to risk losing their Second Amendment rights. The expressed purpose of the fiduciary program, according to the VA, is to protect veterans and beneficiaries who are unable to manage their VA benefits through the appointment and oversight of a fiduciary. At no time during the fiduciary evaluation process does the VA determine if a veteran is a danger to himself or others. Yet, any veteran who is deemed unable to manage their benefits on their own by the VA is automatically barred from purchasing or owning firearms or ammunition. Their names are distributed to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS, which federal firearm dealers use to determine a person's eligibility for gun purchase. There, veterans with fiduciaries are placed in an adjudicated mental defective category that indefinitely neuters their Second Amendment rights. FBI data from 2023 shows that nearly 98% of the names placed in the NICS mental defective category by federal agencies were handed over to the FBI by the VA. You may be fined and or imprisoned if you knowingly violate this law, the VA warns. A memo released by House Veteran Affairs Committee Chairman Mike Bost notes that the decision to name a fiduciary and disarm veterans is often made by VA General Schedule employees, not a court or similar judicial authority. There is an appeals process for veterans who want relief of firearms prohibitions imposed by the law, but whether or not that relief is granted is once again determined by the VA. The committee estimates that hundreds of thousands of veterans and their family members have been denied their constitutional right to bear arms based on the judgment of low-level bureaucrats. America's heroes should never have to fear losing their God-given right to self-defense simply for seeking the care they have earned in the process of protecting our republic, Roy told The Federalist. Yet, instead of focusing on securing the border or defeating foreign enemies like China, Democrats are set to take aim at our veterans' Second Amendment rights. I am proud to take a stand for our veterans with this legislation and to fight to prevent the Biden administration from infringing on their fundamental human rights to bear arms in self-defense.
All right, John, you're up first in show notes to talk about this one, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this a lot of times on the podcast because this is not the first time that something like this has come up with regard to the VA. I worked for 25 years as a financial planner. I knew a lot of people who needed help managing their day-to-day personal finances who were not mentally defective. Most of them, 99.9%, were not. We're not talking to somebody who's developmentally disabled, somebody who has head injury. We're just talking ordinary, average people who just are not good handling money or who get into debt over their heads. That's no reason to deny them their Second Amendment rights. Rob?
Right, let's talk about when you might request help with your finances. Hi. We have some property in one town, maybe a small business that we owned and managed, perhaps a rental property that we own, and we're now going to leave town and travel. You appoint someone to manage your finances. John, you saw it all the time as a stockbroker or financial manager with stocks and bonds.
Right.
Come on.
I mean, I set up managed money accounts where we managed their investment. They put the money with us, and we did, well, I didn't do it personally, but we had managers who determined how much went into large stock, how much went into small stock. We did everything.
Well, and what this law has said is that if a veteran does that, they get denied their Second Amendment rights. Let's take it one worse. Bad things happen to good people. I've known friends who had what they called cancer brain. They were in the middle of chemo. Wow, are they in a terrible place? Going through that is a trial, let alone the fact that they suffer some mental impairment as they're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be managing their finances. We're smart enough to say, hey, as a firearms community, let me hold your guns, because this is going to be a rocky road. I'm looking forward to shooting with you when you recover at the end of it. And someone saying, I am not competent right now to manage my finances, they get denied their Second Amendment rights, and then have to go hire lawyers and dragged through courts perhaps for years to get their rights back. This attempt by the Biden administration to disarm more veterans, it is ripe for a quick and hopefully unanimous decision from the U.S. Supreme Court after the Bruin decision has come out. The court would accept the case, overturn the lower court ruling, and return the case for reconsideration immediately. That then establishes precedence, at least in that district, if not nationwide, depending on how it's appealed. This is one where the Biden administration should be very careful how they appeal these cases. John, do you know if issues involving veterans have different status? Is that considered on a nationwide basis, or would that be federal district court at a time?
I think it would have to be national. I mean, I'm just guesstimating, but something similar came up 2017, 2018, where it was actually coming from Social Security Administration, and Congress said, no, you did not have the right to do this. They overrode it. Then President Trump signed it, and those people that the Social Security Administration sent to the NICS system regained their Second Amendment rights. This is no different than that.
Yeah. Paul? Muted, buddy.
Yeah, I was muted, wasn't I? I'm unmuted now. Okay.
You're unmuted now.
Yep.
All right. When this was discussed on Saturday, it came up that this is a great bill in and of itself. However, it's got a decent chance of clearing the House. It's got, I'd give it honestly about a 30% chance of clearing the Senate, and it's got a 0% chance of getting signed by Biden. Because it is a pro-rights bill, and Biden's not about your rights, so he's going to veto it if it gets to him. He hasn't said that, but he's going to. It's great that these people can introduce these bills when they know they cannot get passed. Let's introduce them and push them when they can get passed as well.
Mm-hmm.
But one reason it may be important it's a show bill. You're absolutely right there, Paul. But when the case is presented to the U.S. Supreme Court, then especially given the questions that have been raised about Chevron deference, can the people who are appealing the case say, hey, nowhere in the law does it expressly state this right in the legislation as passed. This government bureaucracy has exceeded its stated authority. Overturn this on legal grounds. So that will help.
Get a comment in here real quick. Coop from CNT Designs and Arms put a comment in. He says, you throw me a gun parts catalog and I can't manage my own money. I'm right there with you, Coop. I am. Especially what dangerous for me is when I go over to a website, which I just did here for investigation purposes a few minutes ago while I was on the air, and go to ammoseek.com. Then my credit card starts screaming for mercy. But anyway, let's see here. Yeah, we're good there. Let's go ahead, guys. Let's move on. We got to get to our DGU segment. We are going to step aside to break, folks. When we come back, we've got 3 DGUs to cover for you, and we'll get to those right after we hear from the complete combatant. Right back, right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
Assemblyman Steve Hawley.
Whoops, that isn't what I wanted. Let me see if I can get that to go. And here,
these discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The defensive gun use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions, and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations.
They should be, though. They absolutely should be. Rob, you've got the first DGU segment in our, and let me say, this is the DGU segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Rob, take us to Michigan, man.
Yeah, Stone Lake, Michigan in particular, a newly released video shows a customer coming to the aid of a store clerk. It was shortly before 10 at night when a criminal, a thug, dressed in black, pulled a mask over his face as he entered the store. He threatened the clerk with a box cutter. He told the clerk, "You know why I'm here." The video shows the robber approaching the clerk. Meanwhile, in another part of the store, a customer just pulled a six-pack out of the cooler, and he turns and goes, "This isn't right." He could see the masked robber. He couldn't see what the robber had in his hand. You could tell the defender, the customer, could tell by the look of fear on the clerk's face that this was a dangerous situation. The customer, who is a valid concealed pistol license holder, pulled his handgun and fired 3 shots, and then another 3. One finally hit. He did it all with the six-pack still in his left hand. One shot hit a liquor bottle behind the counter, and another hit the robber in the arm, back, and the face. The robber fell to the floor and started crawling toward the defender. I'm not sure this story doesn't make sense. I'll describe what's written here. He told police he then ran to his car to get another magazine and then held the suspect at gunpoint until the police arrived. I assume they mean the defender. The prosecutor for the county said he's waiting for the police to finish the investigating before deciding whether to file criminal charges against the customer. In Michigan, we do have defense of others as part of the law. If those others are in a situation where there's a dangerous force being used against them. And certainly in this case, we're looking at facts in regard to that. The victim of the robbery described it in much more clear terms. Quote, "He saved my life, period," close quote. The suspect was arraigned on 3 charges, including armed robbery. Due to him being a 3-time felon, the attacker is facing life in prison. His female companion, who the police found in his car outside, was arrested for possession of meth, and she had an outstanding warrant for drug possession.
That's a shock. That's a big shock. John, you've got a great comment here. What you got, man?
Given the guy had to shoot one-handed, this is why you practice shooting both strong hand only and weak hand only, along with a two-handed grip. Myself, I would have put the 6-pack down and used both hands, but that was just me. Rob?
This is a great teaching moment. Whether you're at your range, some ranges might not let you do it. If you're at home, take anything, a handkerchief, an empty water bottle. Hold it in your support hand or your shooting hand. And as you pick up your gun to fire, you have to drop what is in your hands. That's used in some competition stages as well. Paul, what you think?
This is a really good thought experiment. Well, first of all, let me agree with Coop at CNT Designs and Arms. He says, "Don't get in between a man and his after-work beer." I love that comment. And this is a really good. Rob, you and I talk about this all the time. You can't do something unless you first have thought about it. This is a great experiment. Whenever you go into a store, think about if this convenience store starts getting robbed right now, what would I do? If I'm going in to grab a 6-pack of beer and all of a sudden there's a commotion, I turn around and there's a guy with a knife at the counter and the clerk there is cowering, what would I do? You won't be able to do it as effectively if you haven't thought about it first. If you think about it enough times, eventually you're going to come to the point where if it does happen, oh, I know what to do. I've already thought about it. This is where I need to go. This is what I need to do.
Yeah, let's amplify that, Paul. More than an abstract thought. Yes, I once checked off the box that said this is what I should do. Unless you've practiced it, it's really hard to do it when you don't have the ability to think.
Let me get a couple more comments in here. Dana, by the way, Dana is the guy that writes up our DGU segments for us. Dana says no charges are being filed against the customer/defender. And Robert says justified shooting, defense of logger. CNT Designs and Arms Coop says, I was hoping a good Pilsner. And George, this is great. Convicted 3 times means he probably committed many, many more crimes. Yeah, you don't get convicted on your first go-around through the courts, and you don't get convicted 3 times unless you've had 8-9 trips through the court system to get convicted 3 times. So yeah.
Defense of a third person.
Yep.
You get the right to defend a third person because they are facing a lethal threat. Again, why did you use a firearm, Mr. Morse? I did that because it was the safest thing to do in this circumstance. If I didn't, worse things would happen. Someone might die. You have to be able to articulate that. More to the point, you have to get a prosecutor who will listen to that. Y'all need a lawyer.
Amen. Let me get one more comment here on this story. Brooke says, we just had a stage where we had to start with a money bag in both our hands, drop it at the start signal, draw and shoot. IDPA New England Regionals. I love this example because, look, if you're being robbed and they say, give me your phone, throw the phone at them. You don't need to, wind up and do a New York Yankees pitch. Just toss it, and that they're going to pay attention to whatever's in the air. That gives you a chance to go to your belt and start your draw stroke. If you got something in your hands, drop it and drop it in the direction of them. Their eyes are going to follow what's in the air. They're not going to be following you, and you're turning and starting your draw stroke. I love that idea.
We have good listeners. I love it.
Let's see here, John. Let's go to Dallas.
Yeah, our next EGU comes from Dallas, Texas. We have said that you should not shoot through doors because you do not know what is on the other side. But with the prevalence of video doorbells and other monitoring devices, there is no reason not to know what is on the other side. But at the same time, realize even though you may know what is outside the door, what is beyond that may not be known. Ethan Rodriguez told a supposed maintenance worker he was not home through his doorbell camera, and the worker left. It was shortly before 6 p.m. When the worker returned, he was no longer alone. The pair now attempted to kick down the door to Rodriguez's apartment. Through the camera, Rodriguez could see a gun in one of the suspect's hands. Here's the catch. Rodriguez was home. He proceeded to fire 13 shots through the door. One of the attempted home invaders fired back at the door, but neither the victim nor his brother were hit. The man's neighbors across the hall were not home at the time, but in the video you can see bullets flying into their apartment. The man's wife and 7-month-old boy were also not home. One of the two men, a 30-year-old, had been arrested on charges of aggravated assault, deadly conduct, and attempted burglary of a habitation. Police did not say whether his cohort had been identified. Rodriguez told reporters his family would be breaking their lease and looking for new housing elsewhere. Rob?
Wow. If you literally have a one-room apartment, you might be able to persuade me that you were tactically required to shoot through the door. Okay, if there's so much as another bedroom, now you've got a fatal funnel. You can wait till they enter your apartment, at least till they open the door. Video cameras aren't good enough because you're depending on luck. You really, really are depending on luck. Paul, what do you think?
I have a big problem. Even with a video doorbell, that video doorbell does not pick up the sight picture from your gun. I have a big problem with firing through a door. Unless the only place you can be assured of where those bullets are going to hit is what's in the sight picture of your weapon when you activate the trigger. In the story, you can see that the bullets did not stop once they got through the door. They did not enter the attackers. They went through the door and then into the apartment on the other side of the hallway. If somebody were in that house, in that apartment on the other side of the hallway, we could be dealing with an extreme tragedy here. I think it's just happenstance that there was no occupied, that the other apartment was not occupied at the time. Masad Ayub, and I gotta find the button. Masad Ayub is famous for saying there's a lawyer attached to every bullet in your firearm. Let's be absolutely, look, he could have waited for that door to come open, get a good sight picture, and while they're in that fatal funnel coming through the door, he could have had a great shot and possibly even a chance of striking both attackers with the same shot if there is overpenetration. At the very least, he could have stopped the lead one. I don't want to say this guy did something wrong, but I think he could have done it better.
He violated rule number 4 of Cooper's rules. 4 rules. Be sure of your target and what lies beyond it. Absolutely. I mean, he could have been found to have used justified force, self-defense force, yet still be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter if he'd killed somebody in that other apartment.
He may have had justification. What he did was clearly not best practice, and that's what we try and talk about here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Robert agrees with us, by the way. He says, wait until they get in the doorway / fatal funnel.
Let's talk about that if we can. That doesn't mean standing right in front of the door. Since these are distance tools, why aren't you, okay, you've got a 2-bedroom apartment. You're back in the back of a room. Hopefully it's dark. The front room is lit. You can literally stop your attackers and they never see you. Hopefully,
absolutely.
It'd be nice if interior walls would stop bullets so you couldn't get shot either. Doesn't happen very often. Sorry.
Well, if you think about it, living in an apartment, your ammo choice is very important. Don't use full metal jacket. Don't use ball ammo. Use something that is going to open up in the invader, or something that's going to fall apart in the wall. A frangible. I'm not sure if I'd want to use frangible, but certainly use hollow point. Right. Unless you're in New Jersey where it's illegal.
True one-room apartments are rare. Usually there's at least a bedroom there somewhere. Let me get this comment in because I think Coop's on it. I don't like shooting through the door. Back up, call the cops, leave it on speaker, and get to a position you can defend. I love Coop's reasoning there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if worst comes to worst, get into the hard corner, right?
and at least get if you can't get cover, at least get concealment. Let's get to our last DGU here. This one out of Farmington, Missouri. A heated argument between a married couple ended when the wife defended herself. The argument started earlier in the day, and a husband's rage was fueled by alcohol. The 43-year-old man threatened his wife with physical violence, and he also threatened to kill her. When he acted as though he was going to carry out his threat and get a gun, she got hers first. She shot her attacker multiple times. Both of them called 911 following the shooting. However, he died while he was on the phone. The man had served 8 years starting in 2009 after entering an Alford plea in a domestic assault case out of Des Lodge, Missouri. An Alford plea, by the way, I'm not attorney. I do not play one on TV. I believe an Alford plea is I don't admit to the crime, but I'll take the punishment anyway.
Right.
Before we get out, I'm going to let either of you have the first crack on this because I need to think about this one for a second before I offer.
The first thing I was going to say is, if he had a firearm, he was also a prohibited person. He had served time, domestic assault.
Yeah.
He was a prohibited person, and he had served more than a year and a day.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, John, I think you just underlined something really important there. This was not a case of, quote, domestic violence where somebody raises their voice. You don't get 8 years for raising your voice. This was assault and battery in a domestic situation. That's how you earn 8 years. Now,
and it probably was pretty bad.
It says he served 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
He could have been convicted for a lot more than that and got out for good time behavior.
Right. So,
bingo.
Wow. That was a violent crime that he served 8.
Got to get this comment in. Got to. He died while he was on the phone. 911 put him on hold for that long?
Well, it's I'm constantly amazed. I've read thousands of DGUs now. Some of these people aren't in the best shape when they start the confrontation. I'm thinking they've been on drugs and alcohol for a long, long time, and they get shot, and they succumb quickly.
Well, at least in the case of alcohol and many drugs, their pain receptors aren't working the best, and so they could be in a lot worse physical condition than they think when they start making that 911 call.
Interesting.
Let's go ahead, and we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we'll get into what we've been doing in media, and we'll get to that, and we'll shut the show down right after we hear from JPFO. Right back, right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
All right, this is the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. On this segment, we normally go through and say what we've been doing in media since the last time we were together. Rob, it's been a couple of weeks. What have you been up to over on Slowfax, man?
I had a long time to think as I flew home, so I posted an article this morning. It's scandalous when millions of us in the United States are put at risk by bad government policy. Likewise, it's important to recognize when we're doing the right thing and to promote it, to get more of it. And we're saving thousands of lives every day. It's hard to understand that because some of this problem is patently political, and some of the difficulty is simply the size of our virtue. How can we begin to understand that millions of us prevented serious injury and probably death by using a firearm? Thousands of us do it every day. Why try and put it in perspective? That article is called How Big Are Our Virtues? It's at slowfax.wordpress.com. My articles are picked up at Clash Daily and at my blog, also now sometimes on OpsLens. John, what have you been up to at No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money?
Well, as we talked about earlier, the anti-gun politicians in St. Louis are up to their old tricks. They want to ban AKs and ARs in the name of crime prevention. However, over 90% of firearms recovered from crime scenes in St. Louis were handguns. Fortunately, Missouri has state preemption and an attorney general who has not hesitated in calling out Mayor Tashana Jones on it. Any ban would violate state law. In other news, I posted the NRA ballot petition for Judge Phil Journey. If you are a voting member, please download and fill it out and send it back to Phil. If you have other friends that are voting members, have them sign it as well. Finally, it looks like the Dallas Safari Club is starting a North Carolina chapter, and I have information about that up on my blog. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com.
Rob, I want to talk about your article for just a minute. It's really hard for us to get across that we do thousands of times more good than is done harm with firearms, simply because if somebody reaches for their belt and stops a crime without ever drawing the firearm, that never gets reported in the news. It doesn't become widely publicly known. If someone does draw the gun and never fires a shot, same thing. That's not news. That's Tuesday in rural America. The only time let's face it, the modern news cycle, if it bleeds, and that's not modern, it's all news cycles going back to the 1950s. If it bleeds, it leads. If somebody gets shot, That is news. And
well, again, to say it's 2.8 million, you go, yeah, but what's that? Well, look, we stopped over 30,000 murders in that year. I looked at the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. We defend our times more often than that. And frankly, we all know some people who might have died from a heart attack or COVID last year. To put it in perspective, there are 15 states whose population is smaller than the number of people who defend themselves every year. We do it a lot.
And I want to go one more turn off into left field here. And I want to say, personally, I have been through CPR training in my adult life besides when I studied and became an EMT. Besides that, I've been through CPR training in my adult life 6 times. And that is because in the 70s, if everybody knows CPR, we're going to save so many lives. If everybody carried a gun, how many lives would we save?
Well, Paul, I'm glad you brought that up. There are about 1/3 CPR resuscitation attempts outside of hospitals each year. So we defend ourselves 8 times more often than we use CPR to save a life. You're right. We should teach self-defense in schools.
All right. John, anything else we need to bring up, or should I start shutting this down? I'm getting
shut down.
All right. My end, I've got really just, if you want to know what I've been doing in the media, look wherever you're at right now past the 7 days. I've been doing bullets, and I've been covering news. That's kind of what I've been up to. Other than behind the scenes, I've been doing a lot of conference calls. I've been doing a lot of emailing back and forth, inventorying, packing equipment, doing that kind of thing. So that's what I've been up to. That does wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Amy, Dana, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, Carrie Ann, and Rob, until next time,
stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, that is the end of the recording for podcast. Really, again, there's going to be almost no after show tonight, simply because I have got to get this turned around and get it put out for podcast, and I've got more stuff to do tonight for getting ready for GRPC. So, one last comment I want to get up on the screen to our live audience. Warsaw Patriot, Paul, I love your recording of the 1928 Law of Germany. History is important. You can thank Charles Heller for that. Charles Heller is the guy that does that voiceover, and it did the ad for JPFO. There are 2 of them I have that have that. Well, actually, there's 2 of them I have loaded in the software to play that have that in there, and I think I've got a total of 6 ads from him for JPFO. And yeah, that is it is incredibly important. Every time a dictator takes away the guns, what comes up shortly after that is the rounding up of the people. So anyway, we're going to shut it down. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. And everybody, we will see you tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central Time for another edition of The Bullet, and 7 p.m. Central Time the rest of the week.